Hello, welcome to the second video introducing the AlefBet in preparation for Word of Torah, a new series on how to read the Hebrew Bible. Today we'll be looking at letters from the Hebrew AlefBet which have more than one sound. In particular, we'll be looking at the symbol Dagesh, which changes the sound of a particular letter. Now, I should tell you, all of these symbols that tell us about the vowels or changes to the sound of the letters, these are called nikud or nikudim in the plural, and they're really just to act like stabilizers when you're learning to ride a bicycle. The purpose is to teach you how to anticipate the vowels, but when you're completely fluent, you'll be able to read without these dots and symbols. First of all, we want to look at the letter bet and vet. This is the same letter of the AlefBet. It can make a B sound or a V sound. Classically, with a Dagesh, which is this dot in the middle of the letter, the Dagesh indicates that the sound is more abrupt. The bet sound is a plosive, it's more abrupt. So when you see a Dagesh, it means it's the more abrupt version of the two sounds. So for example, here on the right-hand side on the top line, we have a bet with a schwa. So it just makes a B sound. And below, we have the same letter without a Dagesh, again with a schwa, and the sound is V. The second letter on the top line, from the right-hand side, because of course in Hebrew we read from right to left, we have a bet with the Dagesh in the middle of it, with a triangle of dots underneath. This triangle of dots is called segol and makes an sound, as in bed. So in combination, the bet with a Dagesh and a segol makes the sound be, whereas the vet below it without the Dagesh makes the sound ve. The third from the right on the top line is a bet with a Dagesh and with a chirik underneath. So this makes the sound be, whereas the vet below it without a Dagesh makes the sound vi. Be and vi. The fourth from the right with a Dagesh, so a B sound, and a patach underneath R sound. When you put them together, you get bar, whereas the vet below it is a var. With a tseire, the bet is bay, and without a Dagesh, it's a ve. With a cholem, the dot over it, this vowel makes an O sound. So a bet with a Dagesh and a cholem makes the sound bo. And without a Dagesh, but with the cholem, it makes the sound vo. A bet with a Dagesh and a kametz makes the sound bo, and without vo. Over here we have a diagonal 3 dots, which makes an u sound. So with a Dagesh in the bet, it makes boo, and without the Dagesh, vu. Here's a couple of examples of bets and vets with and without Dagesh. The first word, bevakasha, means please in Hebrew, bevakasha. You'll notice that the first bet has a Dagesh, so it makes a B sound, and the second one has no Dagesh, so it makes a V sound. So you can see these compared very closely next to each other. They can even occur in the same word. Bevakasha, 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 please. The next letter down, we start with a bet with a Dagesh, and with a patach vowel, so this is going to be bar. The second letter is a resh, which is like an R in English, although it should be further back in the throat, a guttural R sound. R. So this makes a bar sound, but underneath the resh is a schwa. This is a schwa nach, a resting schwa, so it makes no sound. So effectively we have two syllables here. Bar, and then this is a vav with a vowel under it. When the vav has a vowel under it, it makes a V sound first, and then the vowel. This is kamet, so it's like a O. The final letter is one new to you. This is a zayin, which is like a Z in English. So this syllable is vaz. Vaz. Barvaz is a duck. So first we have bevakasha, barvaz. Please, duck. And finally, we have Tel Aviv. A tal is a hill, and aviv is a word for spring. We have an aleph with a kametz underneath, and then we have a vet with a chirik underneath, which makes an I sound, like in stick. But then afterwards there's a yod, which is like a Y in English, and this extends the chirik sound, V. And then finally we have a vet again, V. Tel Aviv. The next letter we're going to look at can be kaf or a chaf. As you know, the Dagesh selects the most abrupt sound. So in kaf and chaf, the kaf is the more abrupt sound. It goes from silence to a full sound quicker than chaf. Chaf slides in, but kaf begins abruptly. So the kaf has the Dagesh. So this is k, and this is ch. This is ke and che. Ki and che. Ka and cha. Ke and che. Ko and cho. Ko and cho. Ku and chu. The top line is the kaf and the bottom line is the chaf. Here's an example. In the last video, I raised the word kova, which means a hat, not necessarily a kippah, but any kind of hat. Kova begins with a kaf, a vav with a dot over it. So there's no V sound here, it just makes the vowel O. Then we have a vet with a patach underneath. So there's no dagesh, so it doesn't make a b sound, it makes a v sound. And then this final ayin, which has no vowel assigned to it, doesn't make a sound at all. So this is kova, kova. The second word has both kinds of kaf. It has a kaf, and the third letter is a chaf. The first is a kaf with no vowel on it, but the vav, which is the second letter, has a dot over it. So there's no V sound, it just makes an O sound. So this is ko. The third letter is a chaf with a patach. So this is cha, ko cha. Fourth letter is a vet, no dagesh, so a v sound, with a chirik underneath, which makes an I sound, and a yod, like a Y in English, after it, which extends the chirik sound. So this is V, and then we have a final mem. So these syllables are ko, cha, vim. This is the word for stars. There's something quite cute about the word for stars, because on the top line you can see that kochavim, which means stars, but if you put a space in between the vet and the yod, you have two words, kochav yam. Kochav yam means a starfish. It literally means star, sea. It's a sea star. The next letter which can make two sounds that we want to look at is pei and fei. So because the dagesh indicates the more abrupt sound, pei is the more abrupt sound. That's the plosive sound. So the top line with the dagesh in each letter is the pei, and the bottom line without dagesh is the fei. So we have on the top line p, and then below it fa, and then with the segol pe and fe. With the chirik pi and fi, on the top line we have with the patach vowel pa and fa. With the tseire, the two horizontal dots, we have pei, and below it we have fei. With the dot over the pei, which is a cholem, this is po, and below it is fo. Second to the end, on the top line, the pei has a comets, so that's po, and below fa. And then finally in the kubutz, the diagonal three dots on the pei is pu, and the letter below it is making a fu sound. So pa, fa, pe, fe, pi, fi, pa, fa, pei, fe, po, fo, pa, fa, pu, fu. The conditions of a word can change whether or not it has a dagesh. The top word in red is panim, which is a face. But the way to say before in Hebrew is lifnei, which means to face. Now this actually has a yod and a seir at the end, so this is to the face of, or before something, so it needs a word afterwards to say what it's in front of. But actually the root is the same. You have a pei, a nun, and a yod, and here we have a fei, a nun, and a yod. This has lost the mem at the end and gained a lamed at the beginning. But the root of this word is the same. The top one is face, and the middle one is before, but literally to the face of. But notice that in the top word, in red, the pei has a dagesh, but in blue, it has no dagesh. So the sound in the top is panim, and then the sound in the blue is lifnei. You'll also notice that the fei this time doesn't have a vowel. That's because the vowel is coming from the lamed before it. So lamed, chirik, fei is lif, whereas pei, comets, nun is pon. The nun also has a chirik and then a yod to extend the sound. So it's ni, and then the final mem, ponim, lifnei. We also have this cutie character down here, which means to spring or to jump. And we're starting here with a letter which is new to you, which is kof, which is like a K or a Q in English. And it has a schwa. Now, we can't blend beautifully from the kof to the fei. It's just not quite possible. So we need to give a little vowel bump. So this must be a schwa na, a moving schwa. So this is kafi. The first two letters are kafi, because the fei has no dagesh, so it's making a f sound, and it's got a chirik underneath, extended by a yod, which is like a y in English. So kafi, and then we have this tzadi, which you encountered last time. Because it's in the middle of the word rather than at the end, the tail of the tzadi is tucked underneath it, like a dragon guarding its gold. So this is a ts sound, and with the comets, it's tso. The hey at the end is like putting an H at the end of a word in English. It's not bringing a vowel, it's just indicating that there's a vowel associated before it, the letter before. So this is kafitsa, kafitsa, which is to jump or to spring. Kafitsa, panim, lifnei, kafitsa. Next, I want to show you a slight variation on this theme, which is Shin and Sin. Now, whereas before we had an abrupt sound and a non-abrupt sound, these are two non-plosive sounds, two non-abrupt sounds. This shin on the top line has a dagesh or a symbol similar to a dagesh on the right-hand prong of this letter shin. It makes a sh sound, shin. But below it, when the dot is on the left-hand prong, it makes a s sound. So the top on the right is sh, and the bottom is sa. The shin with a schwa is sh, and the sin with a schwa is sa. If we go over to the second letter, the triangle of dots underneath it is the segol, and this makes a she. Below is se. The next letter, the shin with a chirik, is shi, and below is si. The next letter with a patach underneath is sha, and below is sa. The next is she, and below is say. This is a shin, so the dot on the right-hand prong is calling this a shin. But there's also a dot on the left-hand prong, which is the cholem, which makes an O sound. So with two dots separated on the shin, one is making it a shin, and the other one is making it an O sound. So this is show. Underneath, we have a greater problem. Both of the dots are on the left-hand side, just right in exactly the same place. This is not going to come up very often, but when it does, it will be a little bit confusing. We'll come back and I'll clarify that when it happens again. So shin with a cholem is show, and sin with a cholem is so. The penultimate letter on the top line has a comets, so this is sho, and below it is a sin with a comets, which is so. The final letter on the top line is a shin with a kubutz, which is shu, and below is a sin with a kubutz, which is su. So in the first word here, which is sin yod final mem, the dot is on the left-hand side, which makes a s sound. It has a chirik, so it's si. The chirik is extended by the yod, which is like a y in English, so it's si, and then a final mem, sin, sim. Next we have the very famous Hebrew word shalom. The shin has a dot on the right-hand side, or the right-hand prong of the shin. Then we have a comets, which makes an o, sho, Then we have a lamed, which is like an L in English, which has no vowels on it because the next letter is the vowel for the lamed. It's a vav with a dot over it. When the dot is over, it makes an O sound. And in this case, there's no v, just the whole of the vav becomes an O sound. And then we have a final mem. Shalom, shalom, sim shalom. The next letter down, we can see that the ayin is being combined with a vav with a dot over it. So all three of these symbols are working together to make an O sound. All three of these, the ayin, the vav, and the dot over it, are all making one sound, O, because the dot is over. Then we have a sin, because the dot is on the left-hand prong, so it makes a sa sound, with a segol underneath, so it's se. And then the hey is just to emphasize that it finishes with a vowel. So this is o, se, o, se, o, se. This is actually the simplest verb in Hebrew. It just means to make or do, and it's a very general word, which can be put in a lot of different circumstances. And then the final word at the bottom in blue starts with a mem, which, because it's at the beginning or the middle of the word, it is open at the bottom here. Then we have a vav with a dot over it, so it makes an O sound. It's an O when it's over. Then this letter here, do you know if it's a sin or a shin? The dot is over the right-hand prong. Does that make a sin or a shin? The vowel underneath it is a komets, and then we have finally we have a vet. There's no dagesh, so it's not a bet, it's a vet. So this word is moshav, moshav. Mem, vav with a dot over it, a shin, because the dot is on the right-hand side, a komets, and then a final vet, moshav. The last letter we're going to be looking at, which is also the last letter of the AlefBet, is tough. Now, if you are Spanish and Portuguese, or Sephardi, Mizrahi, so that's Middle East, North African, or Reform, or Israeli, you will always pronounce this letter as a t sound. So if any of those are your community, just always pronounce this as a t, whether you have a dagesh or not. It's only Ashkenazis at this moment that make a distinction between a taf with a dagesh and a sof without one. But as you're looking for which is the abrupt plosive sound, that one gets the dagesh. That's the tuf. So a t sound is more abrupt and more plosive, so it gets the dagesh, whereas the sof slides in, sof. It's not so abrupt. Okay, so let's just sound this through. T, so, te, se, ti, si, ta, sa, te, se, to, so, to, so, tu, su. Here are a couple of examples of how this would play differently if you use the Ashkenazi pronunciation. In the top word, we're starting with a shin because the dot is on the right-hand side, with a schwa. So in this case, it's a schwa nach. There's no vowel. We're going straight through to the next letter. So this is sht, a sht sound, because the next letter is a taf with a dagesh in the middle of it. The vowel underneath the taf is a patach, which is an R sound. So this is shta, shta. All of these letters are working together to make a shta sound. So shin with a dot on the right, a schwa nach, so it goes straight through to the taf. The taf has a dagesh, so it makes a t sound, and a patach underneath, so it makes an R sound afterwards. So we're going shta, and then the next letter is a yod, like a Y in English, with a chirik underneath it. So this is like yi, ye, and then the final letter is a closed final mem. So this is shtayim, shtayim, which is one of the ways of saying the number 2 in Hebrew. Shtayim. This is actually the feminine version of the number 2. This next word, again we have a shin. The dot is on the right-hand side, so it's a sh sound, with a chirik underneath, so it's shi. The next letter is a bet, because there's a dagesh in the middle of it. So it's the more abrupt sound. It's the plosive, be. This is a bet, but there's no vowel underneath it. So we need to go to the next letter to find out what the vowel is. Here we have a vav with a dot over it. So there's no v sound, it just makes an o sound. So now these two letters together with the dagesh and the cholem are making the sound bo. So this is shi, bo. Then we have a lamed. Underneath the lamed is a segol. So this is le. And finally we have a saf. So this is shiboles, shiboles. And finally, we have a kaf with a dagesh. So this is a k sound. We have a vav with a dot over it. So this is an o sound. We have a saf with no dagesh. So this is a s sound with a segol underneath it. So this is a se. And then finally, we have a lamed. So this is kosel. Now, if you're not Ashkenazi, you will say this is kotel. And already many of you can hear that this is the kotel, which is the word for the western wall of the Temple Mount. Shtayim, shiboleths, kosel. Next time, we're going to be looking about how certain letters, if put at the beginning of a word, can change the meaning. For example, the letter bet. If it's put as a prefix to a word, it can mean in or with. Or a mem can turn a verb into a noun. I'll explain all about that in the next short video. Thank you very much for your time.